Hi, this is Randy Kirk, and today I'm very excited. This is a program I've been wanting to do for weeks and weeks, and these two guys are so busy that we kept on completely missing each other and going this. And finally, though, we've managed to, across the continent, in the Midwest and in Atlanta, we've been able to get and California for me, we've been able to get all three of us together at the same time. And we're going to talk about Optimus today, because those of you who know me well know that I've been beating this drum for a long time all by myself, that Tesla is going to build 1,000 Optimus robots by hand this year. And these guys are going to either agree with me or prove me wrong. We'll see what happens today. So we've got John Gibbs, a co-author of the Elon Musk mission, and an AI expert who has just come out with a new app. Give us 60 seconds on your new app.
Oh gosh. Well, we have several of them, but the one that we just came out with actually is a tool that we sort of leverage the best of human and AI technology to create basically any kind of content you're interested in, like that. So, but we also have things for digital artists as well, including like auto rigging and stuff like that for virtual robots that we were talking about just before we went onto the recording. So yeah, there you go.
All right. Yeah, good. And then Scott Walker, you were giving me a hard time about my last name. I'm assuming you are a Texas Ranger?
No. It's Walter. That's Walter.
Oh, you're Walter, not Walker.
Wisconsin.
Oh, I think I might have got that wrong.
I'm the guy who didn't write Ivanhoe. All right. I'm not Sir Walter Scott.
Yeah. All right, good. And you are someone who helps people deploy robots, yes, and various kinds of automation in factory.
Correct. What we've done is we've created virtual worlds of factories before the term virtual worlds became even a buzzword, going way back to the 80s. So showing 3D animations of robotic cells and later full factory cells, so you can understand what the issues are before you build it, because it's much better to make your mistakes in software than in hardware. And then you can get cost estimates, you can get throughput estimates, you can get return of investment ideas, and even decide, is this a good idea or a bad idea?
Yeah, that certainly seems like a really good idea when you're talking about the kind of money you're spending for those systems.
Yeah.
Okay, and you've been doing that for like a really long time. I think
since the mid 80s. So you decide how many decades that is.
and then John, you're also a professor. And
that's the 1980s, by the way, not the 1880s.
Oh, not the 1880s. Yes. And then John, you're also a professor down there in Georgia, and keeping those kids in line.
Herding cats, as they say, right?
Herding cats. Yeah.
No. They're great. I actually just got off of 2 virtual meetings with students outside of class time today. So that's what Fridays tend to be, is a bunch of catch-up meetings for things that didn't get caught during the week. So yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, all right. Let's dig into the content here. By the way, for those of you who are listening, you know what to do. The liking and you can put down that you'd like to subscribe. You can ask for notifications of upcoming things. All those things. Okay, let's get into the meat. All right, I'll just ask both of you, and then whoever wants to talk. How much do you think it costs right now to build each Optimus robot using 3D printing and hand building, not counting the R&D overhead, just materials and labor? Some idea of what it would cost for each one.
I would say a little south of 100,000. So right now, probably, in that ballpark, maybe a little bit less.
Okay,
because there is some 3D printing, but I think there is also a lot of manual machining that's going on the servos. But that's a cost that will go down really quickly.
Okay, so there's manual machining that's taking place, and that would be the thing.
Prototyping is expensive. It's expensive, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And the 3D printing typically at those levels is not that much more expensive than it would be in production.
Right. And some of the parts of 3D printing are pretty simple, but some of the other more structural elements may be a bit more complex.
Got it. Okay, so you're thinking less than 100,000.
Less than 100,000, yeah. Could be more like 50, but I don't think it's not north of 100,000. I would safely say south of.
South of 100,000. John, are you on board with that, or?
Yeah, I guess it's so difficult at this stage to separate out the R&D from the actual materials cost, because I mean, if you look at the cost of the aluminum parts and things like that, then if you just spread it out on a table as raw materials, you're probably looking at a couple $1,000s, but it's the putting it all together stuff. And how do you, if you have a very high-end CNC machine or a 3D printing machine to prototype these parts, and you prototype 20 of them to get one that actually works. So exactly how do you say how much it costs? Because there's probably 10 parts that they throw away before they find one that they like. So, you're looking at a lot of cost involved in just scrapping things. So I think safely less than $100,000.
Exactly. I'm giving myself wiggle room. I mean, I think it's maybe more like 50, but
yeah.
So now the first one would have cost a lot more, no matter whether you count the R&D or not. The one that they cobbled together. Yeah. And then the second,
actually, the first one might not have cost as much as you think, though, because the Optimus that they brought out that walked around on AI Day and did this kind of thing had a ton of off-the-shelf parts. And the new version that they had that only the torso worked at AI Day, that one had a lot of custom designed actuators, and the plating and things like that were all custom designed too. So that one was probably more expensive than the other one, just in terms of materials, not in terms of counting the human cost.
Okay. So now if you make a third one, would you anticipate that you would be somewhat less expensive? In other words, would each iteration go down in price as you get some things right?
Yeah, you're on a really rapid curve there, the Wright's law. You're going pretty quickly down that thing.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
so
if you have a percentage, all you have to do is build 2 more, and you've doubled the amount of production. So your costs can decline very rapidly at that point.
Right. Yeah, I think I pointed out in one of the videos, but John, at SpaceX, they had one of these custom actuators that they were using for putting on the tiling. And I said, yeah, that one there, that thing costs a lot of money. That thing might be like $500,000, but the second one is a fraction of that, the third one. So once you get the design, you just start putting them out. But whenever you have a robotic cell that has a unique end of arm tooling, that cell costs a ton of money because of all the sunken costs that go into the design of it originally. And then once you have it and it's working and you just start knocking them out, and suddenly the price goes up, almost like software at that point. It's like software cost is what? It's the R&D.
Right.
And then the manufacturing is virtually zero. Now, not to say that it's as easy as software and doing a copy, but comparatively, it goes down.
Right. Okay. So as you build each one, we get the Wright's law effect, and so it's going to get less and less expensive. And I assume, we're talking about Elon here, so we're talking about failing forward fast,
very fast,
and doing lots of iterations. So I'm envisioning in my mind that they might make 3 in a certain iteration and then put them out somehow in some either a use case or just trying to get them to walk right or to interact correctly with some equipment or be able to put something on top of something else or whatever else. And that once they've done that for a week, maybe less than a week, they kind of know what went right and what went wrong. And I'm visualizing that they might make 3 more that would be a fail forward iteration of the first 3.
Correct.
Yeah. And we've had 5 months. So I think that there were either 3 or 4 that existed at AI Day 2. Now, we only officially saw 2, but there was actually a third one that we did see a little bit of. And I believe that one of the engineers told me they actually had a 4th that we didn't even see. So they already had 4 by then, and that's 5 months ago. So given Tesla, we've heard absolutely nothing from them since then, but I wouldn't be surprised if they had 30 or 40 at this point. I mean, on the other hand, they might have decided to only build a couple and really get things working properly, but they could also have built maybe like 30 or 40 arms just to work on that particular part or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I guess, go ahead.
I think you get up to a certain level. You don't do too many right away because you want to make sure you get a certain level of success.
Right.
And then once they get that, they might say, okay, let's knock out a dozen or 2 dozen of these things and just start testing them all over the place. Because it's just like full self-driving. It's the fact that the fleet is gathering so much data. And so at some point they're going to say, now we need to start getting data, mechanical data, as well as software and controls data on these things, and just start deploying it. And they'll get really rapid feedback on that to then decide what's the next iteration going to look like.
Yeah, that's kind of been my visualization of it, is that, as one of my one fellow answering one of my YouTube videos said, well, you don't always even need the lower body,
Right.
and
Right.
it could be that the upper body is the only thing on the line that's trying to do something, or that the lower body is just useless. It's just there, and the upper body is trying to accomplish a task. So, all right, well, then we're talking about less than 100,000 and maybe less than $50,000 a piece. You guys have been studying your videos. Everybody should look at your old videos. They're just amazing to watch. So much fun. As Dr. John, Dr. Know-It-All, as everybody knows you as, you guys have taken it apart knuckle by knuckle and fingernail by fingernail.
That is true. That is true.
So as you now visualize these guys, do you believe that they are capable today, what we saw, even based on what we saw on AI Day, do you believe that they're capable of useful tasks?
Yes.
And what kind of tasks would you most likely anticipate that they could be doing now?
Okay, so a lot of it is a type of machine tending, machine loading and unloading of those processes, which we already saw in the AI Day video, which is something I predicted well in advance of that, because that is the absolute low-hanging fruit.
You did. You absolutely predicted that one.
Yeah, and that is pretty much the the interface between the raw material and the robotic cells. It's always been the human operators that have to bring it from one location to another, and it's always been an enigma of how come that hasn't already been automated. And we can probably go into tons of reasons on why it hasn't been automated up to this point. But I'm going to push back in a second for you there, Randy, what you said, that the tasks are mainly upper body. And I would agree with you if you look at the approach that Giant AI took, that they decided they only need the torso, because they're going after the small assembly market, right. The iPhone kind of market, where you really are locked in your chair the whole day doing it. But when I look at an automotive assembly line, I really don't see anything where people are sitting at a chair and just doing this the whole day. They need to move around. They need a certain amount of mobility. So the whole idea of Optimus is not to re-engineer the cells for Optimus. It's a one-to-one swap out. And this is why Optimus won't have 3 arms or wheels or all these other things, because the whole idea is they need to make sure that they're exchangeable. Now, maybe some point way in the future, when these things get a lot better, we said, we're not going to have humans in the loop anymore. You start coming in with these very bespoke kind of designs that a human can't do. But for now, the whole idea is interchangeability. So if Optimus fails, the human can take over. And if the humans don't show up for work, Optimus can go in and do it. And there's a lot of tasks like that, a lot of them.
Yeah, and I thought the opposite, or not the opposite, but similarly, that the thing about the Optimus would be the versatility. So yes. I've talked to my channel for a long time about the water bottle cap that I was trying to get automated. Well, right. If I own the robot and the robot can't be taught how to do that particular cap, it still might be able to be taught to go out in shipping and put tape on boxes. Yes. So that kind of versatility would make it worth multiple.
Now, in your case, that would make sense. That you don't need to have the legs. Right. You would say the torso is going to be fine. But I'm looking at what Tesla is doing. I'm saying, no, they don't. They need the full Optimus version. It doesn't mean eventually they wouldn't do that. And it might not be like, well, we might need it over at SpaceX, because it could come useful for maybe a lot of the things that we're putting together over there on our production line. So that's the other thing we have to keep in mind, is they may be looking at 2 different use cases. Yeah. If you're looking in the automotive factory, it needs to be mobile. If you're not,
I have a use case for Optimus. I'm going to suggest that we have a SpaceX launch that's coming up in a month-ish. Why not put an Optimus demo version in there as like some of the test mass? I mean, we had the what was he called, the Roadster guy?
Roadster, yeah.
Starman. Yes. We had Starman in the Roadster,
right.
so why not put Optimus in the Starship?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm for that. That was
We can
worth
take one of the
Well,
early
there-
prototypes and just throw him in there. So and he can do like this when he gets into space.
It's great.
Yeah. And someday when the aliens
I'm
find him,
Optimus.
what the hell is this?
So one of the other things that a lot of folks responding to my videos have talked about is the idea that the Optimus will have eyes and therefore it could be doing inspection. And this was another thing that we needed doing these bicycle water bottles that we printed on, is we had considered a lot of times trying to bring in some kind of an inspection camera that would be able to inspect the ink, inspect the printing, to make sure that the registration was right, and then be able to reject those that were not perfect. So do you see that as being something that would like almost immediately have some application?
I definitely see, and it's a question of, is it inspection? See, are Optimus eyes sort of like human level, or are they much better than that? Because obviously there are a lot of vision systems that can do much better than a human. I would think, sure, because a lot of what you were talking about is something that a human is able to pick up pretty quick and easy.
Yeah.
Right.
So I was thinking at
the question in that circumstance, though, Randy, and you would know better than me, is wouldn't it make more sense, because they're just passing down a line at that point? Wouldn't it make more sense to put a couple of cameras there and just, I mean, that just seems cheaper than having a whole Optimus robot doing that. But I could be totally naive about how that, maybe you have to pick it up and like actually spin it around and look at it or something.
Well, there's that. And then again, there becomes this versatility issue where sometimes the quantity is not worth it. It's not worth it to automate with an eye like that. And so the quantity often is the thing that determines whether you can automate or not. But the robot, if you can teach it in 15 minutes or whatever to do the task, it doesn't matter what the quantities are.
But remember, it can also be kind of a dual task, that you're asking the robot to maybe do something while also inspecting at the same time. That's what something we would like to do. Is we don't want an inspection station. We'd like to that when you're doing the assembly, you see that it's done right. And if you see that it's done right, there's no need to inspect it.
I commonly have gone back to the Lucy show.
Where stuff the things in your mouth.
We all know what that is.
She's inspecting the bonbons, and then if they're rejected, she has to eat them. No, she has to put them aside, I guess. And if they're okay, they go through. I'm not sure. I don't remember the details. But again, it would seem like that would be something that the robot could do quite handily.
Yes. Right. And that skit is used in like manufacturing seminars all the time. It's one of the first things I will show students. It is absolutely brilliant, and it encapsulates all the issues that are going on in a production line. It really does.
I know.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so then if we think that the thing is under 100,000 and maybe even under 50,000 as they iterate, and we think it can do useful tasks right now, why wouldn't they be building lots of them?
Well, you know, people have been asking recently why they haven't re-enabled tours in the Fremont factory. You know, because before the pandemic, they had tours and you could go through, and that was gotten rid of for obvious reasons. But then they have been really stalling on starting up the tours again. So I'm like, maybe there's things going on in there they don't want people to see at this point. I don't know.
Yeah, because we've all done the math. And we know that even if these things cost $200,000, they can do 4 shifts. They pay for themselves in a year.
Right.
So if it only costs 100,000 or 50,000, then it would seem like it would be in Tesla's interest as a manufacturer to deploy as many as they can as fast as they can.
Well, and even if they're not economically viable yet, for the research purposes, as Scott was saying earlier, the gathering the data, you have to deploy them somewhere. Right. They can't just walk around watering plants the entire time like they did in the demo video. They have to, you have to put them into some environments where they're going to do useful, even if it's just a test cell in the middle of somewhere and you have them tethered so that they can't fall down and hurt themselves. Even if they're completely useless from an economic sense at this point, they have to be gathering data. So they've got to be deploying them somewhere.
Right. And yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, we all know that when eventually you get the design down, it's probably like $10,000 to mass produce these things. That's, I think, a reasonable estimate. in which case you can say we can still sell them for $100,000 because of the value that they have.
Right.
But I don't look at it as that saving Tesla money right now. It's their R&D, and they've got what, $20 billion of cash lying around, not being deployed for anything. Right. So if it costs them $1 million each, they're still going to do it because they know eventually that thing is going to make them so much money. And the first thing we've always said is, everyone says, the whole idea of the Tesla bot is to make money outside of Tesla. And I'm like, no, it's all about making money inside. The use case is inside. They can justify everything there, and the rest of it, that is the cream on top. That is something else. Now, John, I feel like I'm being cross-examined by an attorney here, that he's trying to lead us to a certain conclusion. Okay, so I need to push back a little bit.
I don't often admit the fact that I went to UCLA Law because I never became a lawyer. And I don't like lawyers, so I don't like to admit that I have that training. But
yes. But the thing is right now is they have cut it off. But the amazing thing is, like, there have been no leaks at all, which amazes me, because we're seeing this, the Cybertruck and everything else. And when you have 1,000 robots out there, you need 1,000 people to operate and curate this thing. That's a lot of people.
I'm not thinking 1,000 robots. I'm thinking of like 6.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Is the chances of a secret getting out is proportional to the square of the number of people that know the secret. Okay, so
and there's a lot of people in that factory. So yes,
there's a lot of people. You get 1,000, there's a lot of chances that it's going to go out. So
now, on the other hand, I will point out that Tesla's really good at this, because you'll notice that the Cybertruck, those magic videos of it jacked up on its suspension, came out within 24 or 48 hours of us actually seeing it at Tesla HQ, driving up that thing with. So, these things are getting leaked about the time that they want it to. So if anybody is able to hold on to this information now, again, and it could be in a corner of the factory where you can't really see it and it's blocked off and most employees don't know what's going on. So I don't know.
Yeah, they might be pretty good. So they probably have a pretty good secure area. And the people that are working in it probably are pretty good at not spilling the beans.
Right. Yeah, it could be like a skunk works thing where they've kind of duplicated some of the things that they need to do, and then they're letting more.
There'll be a certain amount of duplication, but at some point you're really going to want to put it out in the factory doing something, and then it becomes really hard to keep the leaks from coming out.
Now, I don't know if you guys follow Lex Friedman, but I'm a big fan of Lex Friedman, and he's of course also a robotic interested person. And he was talking, he had one fellow on his show that was talking about also the human side, that if you're only deploying 3 or 6 or 20, you don't have much opportunity to start to socialize, if you will, between the robots and the employees, the managers, et cetera, and start to get some kind of data with regard to how all that is working.
Okay. So looking at how, exactly, because at some point you want to see how well it is received by the workers. And there's going to have to be some sort of studies on that.
Right. Well, and there could be eventually, let's say we could reach a critical mass of, I don't know what a shift is right there, but let's just throw out a random number that there's like 1,000 people on a shift, which is, I'm sure, wildly inaccurate, but 2 or 3 of these would be interesting to them, and they'd go like, oh, look at the cute weird robots that are stumbling around. But at some point they're going to cross a threshold, maybe when it gets to like 100 and they're actually doing a good job, where people are going to go, wait, they're going to take my job. And so there will be a tipping point where the factory workers are not going to be pleased about seeing these robots there anymore, because they're going to start to work this out that, wait, that's my job right now. And this thing is doing the same thing, and it can work 24 hours a day without taking vacation days, So, yeah.
Okay. And yet, yes and no.
Okay.
It depends upon the type of job. Right now, we're working on a company that has a situation where it's a kind of manual operation where it's straightforward. It's really not that difficult to do, but the workers have to wear hazmat suits. It's not a hazardous environment. It's just that it's a very dusty environment, and it's very hot and it's very difficult. And the workers are always quitting or threatening to quit. They hate it. They cannot find the people to do it. So they want to automate it, with traditional robots, and are looking in the. So you see that more and more, that there are just these areas that the automation is going in because you cannot find the people to work that particular job. So long as the work that they have to do is engaging, there won't be a problem. If it's like Elon says, if it's dangerous and tedious, it's going to go there.
Right.
And we see plenty of options for. I mean, the whole idea of picking up a part the whole day from one place to another, which we already saw Optimus doing, that's my low-hanging fruit right there.
Right. And
why has that not been automated yet? Do you have any idea, Randy? Trying to turn the tables here.
Yeah. No, so that, there's the $1 million question. That's why I keep pushing this idea. I think that the Optimus is extremely capable by now. 5 months later, I think it can do all kinds of things. That's just me. I don't have any basis for believing that, other than the fact that we saw what it could already do. And we're talking about a company that is so fast to innovate. And I just think, if they can get it to stand upright and they can get it to walk around, after that, getting it to, pick up the bonbon and put it in a box, it shouldn't be the hard part. And then,
right.
if you start getting enough information, enough data, and now you're able to put in the simulations, and now you'll be able to train them on simulations, and then they're training each other because they're just an over-the-air update, so they're training each other.
Right.
It would seem to me like I don't know what's, all these people that are saying, it'll be 5 years before these are in production, and I'm like, I just don't know.
It'll go fast. Yeah, I mean, in the end, a lot of the calculations you have come down to some sort of return on investment. So if we go back to Lucy and the bonbons there, you won't see that manually done anymore. There are robots that are doing that, and not because they don't want the humans eating the bonbons. It has all to do with speed.
Right.
Is that the humans just cannot catch up.
Right.
So you're automating it because it's extremely fast. It's also sterile and a bunch of other things. And so in the end, that's getting through really quickly. So that's one reason you want to do it, is that your costs are going down and you're able to improve the speed. So if you look at like some of these machine tending operations, it seems like that's like straightforward compared to everything else we've automated, which is very complex. Why aren't we doing that? And a lot of it is because the loading and unloading is actually a pretty slow operation. It's human scale. You don't have to worry about it. But there's another part of the calculation. The reason why you automate something is not to replace the human, especially if it can be done the same human scale. It all comes down to quality, because the real cost is not how much it costs to produce a part, but how much it costs you in defects and returns.
Sure.
So if one car goes out with some sort of defect that has to be fixed, not only have you lost the profit margin on that, you've lost it on like the next 10 vehicles. Right. It is really, really costly. And automation is, so repetitive and does everything that the quality is good throughout. So you have these operations like the picking and the placing, the operators are doing loading. There's no value add there. That's not a value added step. And it's not that hard to pick it up and put it in there correctly. I mean, there's all sorts of safeguards to make sure it's in there. That is not going to be an issue on the quality of the part. The quality of the part is then where you actually start putting these things together, the process that the robot is going through to make sure it's done. And it does it repeatably, and it does it with very, very high quality. So at this point, there hasn't been the urgency to go there because it's not affecting quality. And the cost of probably automated traditionally is not going to give you a return on investment on whatever the wages are that you have for that person. And again, they just have to like unload 1 or 2 times a minute. That is something that's very easy to do at a human scale. So there has never been, let's say, the drive or the push to do that. Now because people don't want these jobs. Actually, they don't want to do it.
And that's part of the problem. I think that's one of the reasons why I would be ramping this up as fast as I could, because they're at 127,000 employees now. They're adding employees like crazy. They're going to need to add lots and lots more employees, and the labor force is just not there. There's just no good people. So hard to get good people. So I would see, again, to your point, that part of it is, sure, I'd like to reduce my cost of goods. And another part would be, I'd like to get the quality up. But another part would be, I'd like to be able to get a solid employee that I could put there next week and not have to go through
the other thing to remember is that brakes are very costly.
Oh,
You've
yeah.
seen this big pushback at Amazon and everywhere else about the workers wanting more and more breaks.
Right.
And the problem is that when you get the breaks, like the whole line kind of comes down. It's hard to get it back up, which is why they don't want the breaks.
Right.
But these are really hard jobs where people are doing it. And then how do they get ahead so they can get that 5 minutes to run away and come back? Well, usually it means someone has to come and replace them. If you can just have the Optimus going around when someone says, I need a bathroom break, and he just comes over and fills in for them, and that person can go and do what they have to and then kind of come back. And that now means the break schedules can be far more flexible. You take the break when you need it, not when the clock says that you have to take it. And you might even be able to get more breaks in there. So that might be one area that will actually make people's jobs more pleasant, because it will make sure that when they really need a breather, they can get the breather, and Optimus isn't really doing it full time.
Yeah. And yet, on the other side of the coin, and again, I'm a small business guy. I've never been involved in huge businesses. And a couple of weeks ago, I was going out to a silk screen printing shop where I've helped them with their back-end operation. And while I was there, I'm just looking at these people picking up the T-shirt, laying it on the platent or whatever they call it, having to line it up perfectly, and then the silk screen coming over and doing its swipe. And it's a totally tedious and boring job. But you're today in California, you're paying that person $20 an hour. And on top of that, you've got the other, 20-25%, cost of that employee. So if you can put an Optimus in that situation, and he couldn't find any people to do it last year. I mean, it's just, no matter where he looked, he was unable to find anybody to come to work.
Which means that in order to do that, you're raising the price to $25 an hour as opposed to 20 in order to compete. So yeah, so I think also what Scott is talking about is back when Lucy did that video back in the late 50s or so, these people were probably making a few cents an hour, right? It was even inflation adjusted, it wasn't very much money.
Right.
But the more you're paying a human, if it starts to become with benefits and stuff, say $75,000 a year that you as a company are having to pay for that employee, well, suddenly $100,000 robot doesn't seem so bad. You're like, well, okay, and it can work more hours. So yeah.
Again, to my earlier point, I was perfectly happy to spend $100,000 for that automation to go into my factory, but they wouldn't guarantee that it would work.
Right.
But it was, that was 40 years ago. Okay,
Yeah.
100,000 is a lot more than that now, and I was no problem. I was ready to write the check. So paying $100,000 for a robot, not a big deal. Okay, so I'm of the opinion that they will continue to ramp up this year. So maybe they've made 20, maybe they've made 50, maybe they've made 100. I don't know how many they've made, but they're iterating. They're making them better and better. They're giving them more use cases. They're gathering in the data. They're putting up simulations. They're doing over-the-air updates to get them all smarter, blah, blah, blah. They're doing all those things. And at some point, it seems to me they're going to take it to the next level of building like 25 a week. That's why I say 1,000 this year, is that at some point you're going to say, okay, we've got a clear cut set of use cases. We got clear cut that the robot can do these jobs. Now we need lots of data. We need lots of training. We need lots of this social interaction thing that we need to really understand better. And okay, so the world sees that we've got these in the factories. Great. So I'm thinking that at some point this year, there starts to be a lot of robots, and maybe we do get a chance to tour the factory and see them at work.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice if on March 1st, that's what you see on the tour?
Yeah, it would be amazing.
That would be cool.
It would be amazing. Because if you want to scale to extreme levels, robots are certainly an important way of getting there.
Oh yeah, that does. I mean, that definitely fits with the master plan part 3 for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Which might be why they've been so mum, is that maybe we're going to hear something on the 1st or see it.
Right.
What's interesting about the investor day is that, unlike the shareholder meeting where it seems like every other person I knew got an invite, I haven't heard of anyone that has an invite. So it must be that it's a very small group that's going in there, which means they're going to get quite the tour.
Yeah.
And then they might have like an NDA that they're all signing. It's like, well, you can kind of see it and say you saw some cool things, but there's a few things that are
actually the only person. I mean, I have a pretty reasonable presence out there at this point, and the only person I know of who has an invite is a gentleman from oh gosh, was it Denmark or the Netherlands? But I mean, not even in the United States, which is fine. I mean, obviously anybody in the world, but he wrote me and said, is it worth my going and taking my son? And I said, yes, it is.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely, you should do that.
Identification to me.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, you can always give it to me if you want, but anyway, that's one person out of a lot of thousands of people.
Exactly. So, exactly. Because if you think about it, for the shareholder meeting, I felt like, wow, I was lucky that I ended up getting it. And then Ellie ended up getting it. And then you ended up getting it. And it's like,
right.
It really was random. It wasn't that somehow there was some favoritism they get picked. It's like, wow, this is really, so there was a big enough number. And I think the other thing that happened is that it went under the radar. A lot of people were sleeping on the fact that you had to enroll.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I think there was a much smaller pool that they grabbed from. But now that everyone's filled out that paperwork and you don't actually volunteer to go, the fact that you're in there, they may or may not pick you, which I really think they should say, are you interested in this event? Let us know ahead of time. So I only make sure that we pick out of those that can really go. Because then you get the guy from Denmark who's like, oh, now I got to buy plane tickets and all this stuff. I wasn't planning that.
Yeah. But I mean, yes, I agree. I think that having it be open to anyone is great, but there should be at least a notification sent out like, hey, if you are interested and would go, respond, just some basic thing like that. So yeah.
Well, it's certainly going to be interesting. I've been hyping it up because I think it's going to be maybe the most important announcement that affects more people. Maybe.
Man, I've been so focused on the whole auto part of this whole thing that I hadn't even really thought about Optimus, but it has been it was September 30th was the day. So it'll be 5 months and 1 day past that point. So it would make sense to talk about Optimus again then.
Yes, and he also says it's going to involve SpaceX and the Boring Company. So I did a video yesterday where I spitballed ideas of how SpaceX or the Boring Company might be involved. So the last part of my thesis here, my last idea that I need you guys to either steel man or tear to pieces. It would seem to me then, if they start getting up to where they're building 25 a week or something like that, and they've got it kind of down and it's kind of designed well for a factory manufacturing, that they would put up together a pilot line. And I'm saying before the end of the year, they put a pilot line.
Wait, a pilot line to build the robots, not a pilot line that they're working on.
A pilot line to build the robots, and there will be Optimus, and there will be Optimus on the pilot line building the Optimus.
Now that's the way to make the sausage. So,
so what? Any limiting factor? Any reason why it could not happen by the end of the year to put together a basic pilot line? Again, I've done really light manufacturing. Plastics manufacturing is easy compared to the stuff you guys are working with all the time. But is there something, can you imagine something that would stand in the way of putting together a little pilot line and maybe building up to 1,000 a week?
1,000 a week.
Ramping to that.
1,000 a week would be pretty. I could see. I mean, the only thing I see is when you have like the flexible components and the connectors you got to snap in, which are notoriously finicky anyway. But there are a lot of other operations that may work out fine. And boy, I mean, that's one of those that at first you might say makes no sense to try to do it because it's going to be so hard to put it together. But that's the whole point. It's what they would learn from it. It's like, oh, look at this use case here. It's really difficult. How do we get it to work? How do we get it to work? So, we do it not because it's easy, but because it is hard.
Yes,
that's really good.
Yes.
But I think also, again, it's worth going back to AI Day when I can't remember if they talked about this during the presentation, but if not, I definitely talked to one of the engineers who pointed out the fact that not the original one that just looked like a Christmas tree with all the lights on it, but even the second iteration that already had the plating, he was like, we're already optimizing this for mass production. So that was, day one, day zero kind of stuff that they're talking about. that's been the thing. It's not let's build a really cool one-off robot and it'll cost as much as it costs, which would be cool and awesome. But it's like, how do we make this from the get-go something that we can make a lot of? And so I think what Scott was saying was really true, is that if you do have a pilot line, even if it's just a pilot line, just an experimental research pilot line, it's just like, oh yeah, when we try to put the arm in here, trying to wire that thing through is a pain in the ass. What can we do to redo that so that we can have something that's a little more like a Lego brick where we just go and it's just easy? Yeah. So, that kind of thing. But
I think it goes two ways. One, designed to make sure it's easier, and also see if Optimus can do it, because that's the problem on a lot of production lines. Right. Is you want to go at it from both directions. I suppose if we go to the SpaceX analogy, I'd love to see the Optimus garden. All
yes.
the doing that was like, oh, that one didn't quite work out, and it's just there. So they probably had a prototype that after like 1 week was already obsolete. Oh, bad idea. Put it over there. The next one over there.
It'll be like a sculpture garden. They can have that over in their Palo Alto. Now that they've taken over HP, they can just put a bunch of these things around as sort of like statuary. Like as you drive in, there's one that like points you the direction you need to go.
Yeah. Here's the week 45 prototype, and week 46 is over here. Number 47.
Yeah.
No, that's the way they work. I mean, think of how many boosters we've gone through. And Starship, and that's the one that's going to be orbital. Oh, it's not. They change it. And then the next one, they have no idea which one it's going to be. That's the way they think.
Yes. And so then I think that my thesis with regard to getting this line so they can build it up to, starting, ramping up to 1,000 a week, is then you've got your basic sales team, if you will, is really not, they don't really care about selling it. What they care about is going out and finding absolutely perfect use cases that are tedious or that are dangerous or whatever else to be able to deploy these into, even if they give them to them for, to use for free, or whether they charge them a nominal amount. Maybe they do sell them, because I'll tell you what.
No, this is Tesla. They will sell them. People will buy them.
They will be auctioned. They will not be sold. They will be auctioned to the highest bidder.
Interesting.
They will be what?
They will be auctioned.
Auction.
You're not going to go out and say you can buy one for 100,000. It's going to be that's what it's going to be. That's how they get sold. At auction.
Wow.
A lot of folks, of course, have said they'll be leased. And the benefit of leasing them is that you keep control in terms of the upgrades and not just even the software upgrades, the over the air, but also hardware upgrades that can be done from time to time. You maintain control. So there's some huge benefits to leasing them. And again, if you were leasing one of those things for $100,000 a year, it would still make sense if it's doing 4 shifts.
The leasing will also be auctioned. And the other thing, just like your Starlink, every month you're going to get another letter. Oh, by the way, we've decided to increase the rates.
Right.
So you're making too much profit. We saw it. All right, it's going to go up. So Elon's not afraid to charge what the market demands. So I have a feeling it's going to be pretty hard. And the lease terms will be like 1 year.
Right.
That's it. And at the end of the year, we're going to renegotiate. And if you don't like it, your competitor across the street is more than happy to take it. So
take it. Yeah. Well,
I actually really like the idea of leasing as opposed, because I don't really see this is a business to business thing right now. I mean, we don't have like home robots. I know there are a lot of people who are like, if it was $100,000, I would buy it today from my house, and maybe they'll be able to lease it as if they were a corporation. But I could see Tesla wanting for the near term to lease it to maintain control over the fleet of robots. And that would make a lot of sense.
It's basically like the EV1. At any
I know, just as long as they don't crush them.
Crush them.
No crushing them in a field out in the middle of Arizona someplace.
I've had a really hard time coming up for use cases within the home. I mean, yes, if you have elderly people that need to be lifted and things, there's some like that. But in general, it's hard for me to see how much nicer it's going to be to have a robot.
I think there's just people who want it. I have
one use case, and you guys are going to agree with me. No matter how good they get these vibrating chairs and stuff, they're never any good for a massage, higher, a little harder. Could you go back? It itches right there. So I'd pay a lot for that.
The world's most expensive back scratcher.
That's it.
It's like,
but yeah, as far as use cases, I mean, think about when the smartphone came out. Everyone's like, what can you do with it? And the only app was that you could take it and you could show it pouring a beer, right? Remember that one?
right. Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
And it was ridiculed. It's not good for anything. I mean, what kind of apps? I can just go to the web, whatever I need to do, I can do on the computer. And now you look at it and like, oh, wow, that's obvious. That was obvious. It's going to be the same thing. Right now, we cannot envision what it's good for, except for a few things here and there. And then entrepreneurs will just shock us with the ideas they come up with.
Sure. Well, if you're gonna mine doing laundry, the whole thing, putting it in the washing machine, putting it in the dryer, taking it out, folding it, putting it away, and cleaning up the dishes. Like just taking it out of the dishwasher. I mean,
those are the two you want.
Yeah, those are what I mean, and they're really hard. I mean, folding clothes is exceptionally complicated. That's like really complicated stuff to do. But again, I couldn't afford that. I couldn't afford if it was $100,000. I couldn't afford that for my house. But there are people who could. There are people who pay maids and people to come in and do that kind of work for them, and it costs around that amount of money per year to do it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, okay, guys, I thought maybe you were going to, show me how this was absolutely impossible, that my theory was completely useless and worthless. But whether I'm a good lawyer or whether you guys are just, telling me the truth here, it seems to me like it's obvious that they should be moving as quickly as they can to put these things out as fast as they can, and ultimately to get into production. Maybe it's not the end of this year, maybe it's next year, but not 5 years, not 3 years. This is something that's going to happen soon.
No.
Right. So I get, you want someone to be a devil's advocate here.
There you go.
I will try my best.
Okay.
First of all, your idea, it's not a crackpot idea. I mean, it's not something that's so way out there we can just say, Randy, what's he been smoking? He's good. Being able to do the production, the cost, all that stuff we can get. The only thing comes down to whether they can really get a prototype that's working. Whether they've hit some snag right now and it's just not any better than what we've seen in there.
Right.
But if that's not the issue, if they've got past that thing and they've got it going and they've got a decent hand and decent navigation and it can do some of these things, then I don't see why you wouldn't turn it loose.
Yeah.
Why not? And like I say, it's all these other companies, they are having a problem because they don't have the cash balance that Tesla has.
Right.
So they're desperate. They've got to come up with something and get it out the door and make sure someone is paying for it. Tesla will make the money on the savings already.
Right.
But they have enough of a cash cushion that they can be patient and they can throw whatever resources they want on there.
Right.
And the other thing, they can attract whatever resources they want. No problem.
Oh yeah.
I think that's the other thing, is that whether or not it's businesses or just regular consumers, I think that Tesla has the reputation, and pretty well deserved, that there are the fanboys, right, and fangirls, that it's like if they say it costs X amount of money, there will be people who will lease, purchase, auction, whatever it is. They will get it for their business. They will get it for themselves just to have one.
Yes.
Again, it's sort of like having a sports car. I mean, if you're a person who is able to afford a $2 million Lamborghini, McLaren, if you can afford something like that, then this is a drop in the bucket, however much it costs. So of course you'd want to have one.
But I try to bring it back to the practical, and that's, that I had a factory, I had 100 employees.
Right.
And I know I can sit here and tell you straight up, if I'd been offered an Optimus for $100,000, I would have written the check, and that was when $100,000 was real money.
Right. No, but again, I'm just saying that I think that the logic is that Tesla would keep this to themselves while they're testing it. But I think, given what Tesla does, as soon as this thing is viable and safe, and can do something useful, even one useful thing, they'll sell it, because they're not in the business of
just doing stuff. They're not like Google and these other like companies that just have these research arms that just burn cash just to see if something works. Tesla is very focused on making money. So yeah, as Scott says, they've billions of dollars. So they could research this for a decade if they want to, but that's not what Tesla does. That they're going to try to sell this as soon as they can. Right. I'm pretty convinced of that.
Yeah, and I would say they're not so much money driven. I think they're more mission driven.
Yes.
So once they found something is going to be useful, they're not going to keep it to themselves. They're going to say, we are going to show that you can start to deploy it.
Right. And it
just turns out they happen to make money along the way, and that money is very important for them to be able to achieve the mission. So they always have a solid business case. They always have a return on investment.
Right. Yes. I think Elon made it very clear that he saw that while the robot, the Optimus, doesn't seem to be perfectly on mission under the first two master plans, clearly he can make the case now that with Master Plan 3, a robot would be super helpful to be able to scale to extreme levels.
Yeah. Everything is about scale.
Right. Yep.
And that is key to the scale. I mean, it's very clear. Everyone was saying, well, you're going to have enough power plants. You're not going to have enough batteries. You don't have enough lithium. You don't have enough this and that. It's a scaling problem. It's a manufacturing problem.
Right. Well, guys, I appreciate it. Like I say, I've been looking forward to this as much as I'm looking forward to Investor Day. So, but not quite. Okay, I'm being honest here. Investor Day has
It's okay. You can look forward to Investor Day.
I'm more interested in that too.
All right. Well, maybe we'll have to do this again after Investor Day and see what has happened. As soon as we have any more information that could make.
We can all cry about how wrong we are.
I don't know that.
We'll be wrong. Don't worry. We've been before.
Yeah, it's only a question of how wrong. It's not a question of wrong. It's how wrong.
Question of degree, right?
That's right. So don't forget, everyone, to please go look at Dr. Know-It-All's channel. You'll love watching his stuff, and follow both Dr. Know-It-All and Scott Walters. Right? I got it right this time? Walter.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll get it eventually.
Follow them on Twitter. And it's been great talking to you today.
Cool.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Same here, Randy. Thank you.
Click the link below to get your paperback, Kindle, or audiobook now.